Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing the newly buffed Groudon in the Master League. Groudon's fast move Mud Shot got more energy generation in exchange for lower damage this season, which honestly I view as a pretty big buff to Groudon. Groudon's never really been about fast move pressure, it's been about reaching Precipice Blades, its incredibly overpowered nuke move, as quickly as humanly possible, and the buff to Mud Shot definitely helps with that. I paired it up with a Lunala and a Xerneas and ended up winning my first 8 games with the team to climb over 2600 ELO for the very first time this season. So, without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and in game 1 we pick up an incredibly good lead, Groudon into Reshiram. My opponent safe switches into Xerneas, and so far they're completely core broken by the Groudon. If they're this core broken, they're very unlikely to call a bait, so I bait with the Mud Shot and then go for the catch and sneak onto Lunala. Even though I don't end up catching a close combat, I'm still fine just preserving that Groudon with quite a bit of energy, because I know the Groudon is going to be an absolute nuisance for that Reshiram to remove from the field of play. Xerneas fires off another Moonblast, I should be able to Shadow Claw them into a range where I can knock them out with the Shadow Ball, and exit with quite a lot of energy to threaten the Reshiram. Shadow Ball lands, that takes the knockout, back in comes Reshiram, and Reshiram will immediately be met with the Shadow Ball. Actually, my switch timer's up. I'm gonna pivot. I pivot back into the Groudon. In the back, they have Palkia as their final Pokemon. And up this much energy, with the new pacing on Groudon, Groudon's about to absolutely take over. Precipice Blades gets a shield. They return fire with the Aqua Tail. But guess what? Mud Shot got its pacing back. Groudon outpaces, making it to the Precipice Blades. Devastating damage onto the Palkia. And at this point, I just don't have a loose con anymore. My opponent can fire off the Aqua Tail and KO the Groudon, but the damage was done. Groudon was just an absolute nightmare. In comes Reshiram, firing off a Fusion Flare at the Xerneas, but Xerneas is able to survive this no problem. I should even be able to overfarm slightly, so I throw 2 Geomancies, take the knockout with the close combat, and then I can throw 1 Geomancy, and if it doesn't KO, I can just pivot back into Lunala. Lunala Shadow Claws down the Palkia, and that's a good game. We pick up a great lead in the next match, Groudon into Dialga, and the Dialga is not switching out. So this could be another one of these teams that is AVA weak to the Groudon. And if so, I think it's pretty safe to go for a Fire Punch bait. But the Fire Punch bait is able to grab a shield from my opponent, and now I'm going to watch for a catch. I'm expecting if they have a ground resist in the back, they'll try and go for it, but it appears they don't. Instead, they just stay in and fire off the Iron Head. That Iron Head does do a solid chunk of damage, but Groudon's already at 1.5 Precipice Blades. So I fire off the Precipice Blades, take the knockout, and I should be able to make a move into the Reshiram that my opponent brings in. This is incredible. Groudon taking a knockout, forcing both shields for my opponent, and now I just pivot into Lunala. Even if my opponent had like a worst case scenario for Lunala, like in a Veltal or a Marshadow in the back, in the 1-0s, Lunala is going to do fine there. My opponent's just going to stay in with the Reshiram. I absorb the Fusion Flare. I just really don't like respecting potential crunches. And my opponent reveals their final Pokemon in the back is going to be the Zekrom. Zekrom racing to the Fusion Bolt, but unfortunately unable to get there. Moonblast lands, nearly picking up the one-hit KO. We get the Moonblast debuff, but realistically, we could have farmed them down anyway. Fusion Bolt takes the knockout. In comes Xerneas, and with Xerneas and a shield, there's just no way out for the Reshiram. Reshiram gets Geomancy down. Man, that team was triple weak to Groudon. Hopping into the next match, picking up a very neutral lead, Groudon into Lunala. After playing out a Lunala lead several times, I learned that Lunala players really like investing shields in this matchup. So as the Groudon, I just started going for the Fire Punch bait, because Fire Punch allows you to outpace in this matchup, and now I can threaten a Precipice Blades for devastating damage. Shadow Ball will not knock out here, but what it will do is put me very low, so I decide to shield once, and then I'm just not going to shield the Groudon from here on out. Precipice Blades is gonna land, that is very clutch, as now they're in farm down range for my Lunala. So I pivot in, trying for the snipe, they're able to save their Lunala, but they send it to Xerneas. This Xerneas is down energy, and this is already a pretty unfavorable matchup for Xerneas. I fire off Shadow Ball is gonna connect, and my opponent now has 7 Geomancies worth of energy. I'm gonna shield because I think I can farm down in 5 Shadow Claws. If I can, they don't get another move, and they don't. Getting that farm down is so big. I'm very healthy. I have so much energy. What is my opponent going to do? They send in a Kyurem White as their final Pokemon. I was expecting them to catch when I doubled up, so that's why I ended up pivoting, but instead they just stay on the field. I should have no loose con in this game by just going straight for the Moonblast. Moonblast does get the shield. My opponent cannot knock out with an Ice Burn. Instead, they're going to have to go for the double Fusion Flare, and they will. And now I just have to watch for the catch. So I just keep farming. My plan is to never throw my move. They try for the catch onto Lunala, they do not get it, and now the threat of a Moonblast forces them to CMP tie. By CMP tying, they now don't have a move loaded for Lunala, so the back-to-back Shadow Balls on Lunala, I'm only going to need one of them, but we're still going to get the win, as Shadow Ball is going to knock out Kyurem White. Hopping into the next match, Groudon into Metagross. This is an incredibly good lead. My opponent is staying in this matchup, so what could they have in the back that also does not want to see the Groudon? They do have a slight pacing advantage here, so I'm going to be putting up the shield as they go for the Meteor Mash and then looking to overfarm. I overfarm quite significantly, going for the Fire Punch bait, and my opponent gets a catch onto a Veltol. I'm very happy that they didn't end up catching a potential Precipice Blades, as that would have been catastrophic. I'm able to rebank a ton of energy and then send in the Xerneas. This team, as you may have noticed, is ABA weak to a Veltol. I noticed that most of the Veltols that I was encountering were in the back, so I decided I would try being ABA weak to a Veltol, and honestly, I wasn't really punished throughout the day. With my opponent having +1 defense, I wasn't quite convinced that a close combat would knock them out, so I do end up full sending the Moonblast, and my opponent ends up shielding, so I think in hindsight I should have just gone for the double close combat there, but either way, we should be in a pretty nice spot. I'm very close to the back-to-back, my opponent is going to let it go, and now I can fire off the close combat at the Metagross, and then go for the combo play with the Fire Punch from Groudon. So I go for the combo play, sending in the Groudon, firing off the Fire Punch, but my opponent anticipates the combo play and catches onto Kyurem Black. That's a very nice play from them. This is a Dragon Tail Kyurem Black. I'm going to go for the bait because even if they call it, it's still good damage. My opponent does end up calling the bait. You know what? I'm doubling down. Surely they don't call both baits, right? They do call both baits. Luckily, I'm still going to win the game, but oh my goodness. This opponent refusing to use that final shield. Free Shock KOs the Groudon, but now I can just bring in Lunala. Lunala answered with the Metagross. Metagross gets the Meteor Mash, but unfortunately for them, the Metagross is just simply too low. Metagross is getting farmed down. All they have left is going to be the Kyurem. Kyurem gets farmed down as well, and the win streak continues. We see basically the worst case scenario lead in the next match, leading Groudon into Ho-Oh. Ho-Oh is a pretty big core breaker for this team, as both Groudon and Xerneas have losing matchups. I save switch into Lunala, my opponent does not stay in, and instead they bring in their Xerneas. Xerneas puts up the shield as I fire off the Shadow Ball. I'm going to be shielding back because if I want a chance to win this game, I'm going to need HP available on this Lunala. Unfortunately, my opponent is not going to get farmed down before they make the next Moonblast. It's going to be close, but unfortunately they will survive. So I'm going to pivot into the Groudon and absorb the Moonblast damage. I know that I'm going to get fully farmed down by the Ho-Oh, but I do know that Precipice Blades, even when resisted, is still a very, very powerful move. So my plan is to bait back out the Ho-Oh, neutralize it with Lunala, and then set up the Xerneas to sweep in the back. And that Precipice Blades did a ton of resisted damage. I can't quite make another Precipice Blades, but I will settle for the Fire Punch. Now my opponents lost basically 3/4 of their Ho-Oh. They're at 100 energy, so they're forced to throw an alignment. Now I can put up the shield, I do get debuffed, and I go for the Shadow Ball. At -1, I don't know if the Shadow Ball is going to KO. I hope it does. It does take the knockout. They get KO'd, and in the back, they have Kyurem White. Kyurem White going to take substantial damage from these Geomancies. Will they full send the Ice Burn or go for the Fusion Flare? They go for the Ice Burn, but Ice Burn does not take the knockout. I fire off Close Combat because I'm just going for pacing now. Close Combat does get shielded. I'm going to watch for the catch. There's the catch attempt, and they do not get it. The patience. We just refuse to throw our charge move. An opponent cannot catch a move that you do not throw, and that is a good game. We get a pretty nice lead in the next match, Groudon into Xerneas. Groudon will have the pacing advantage over Xerneas, as I will make it to the Precipice Blades before they're able to make their Moonblast. Even if they're able to land the Moonblast is still something that I should survive pretty comfortably. However, if my opponent's staying in and shielding, I'm expecting Groudon's going to have a lot of value in the back, so I'm going to shield back. If I throw 4 in the move, they're just going to throw an alignment, so I throw 2 in the move, and they catch the Precipice Blades onto a Veltol. Oh, that is just sloppy gameplay from me. I'm going to rebank the Fire Punch, send in the Xerneas, but oh my goodness, that is absolutely terrible. I tried to anticipate the fact that if I threw 4 in the move, that my opponent would end up just firing off their charge attack on alignment, but unfortunately, by throwing 2 in the move, I end up letting them get that catch. I fire off the Close Combat, but due to the defense boost from Oblivion Wing, a Veltol hangs on 1 HP. I knew I would win charge stack priority because I had the best buddy boost equipped, but that's definitely not ideal. And it turns out my opponent actually had 2 very good answers to Groudon in the back, so I don't really know why they were staying in and investing shields. Kyogre is a bit of an awkward Pokemon for this team to encounter just because I don't have a resistance to water. However, Lunala and Xerneas can both do well enough that I feel like you can still figure a way out even if you do run into Kyogre. They full send Origin Pulse, back in comes the Xerneas. The Xerneas will be able to connect with a Moonblast, but I am outside of Moonblast range, and they are outside of Shadow Ball range. So this is going to be close. I need to manage my HP on my Lunala very, very carefully. If I land the Shadow Ball, pivot into the Groudon, land 2 Mud Shots, and that should put them into 1 Shadow Claw range. That's very important because that means that I will not take the damage from Geomancy. And as they bring back in Kyogre, the fact that I didn't take damage from 1 more Geomancy wins me the game as we get the farm down. We move to the next match, picking up a pretty scary lead, leading Groudon into Keldeo. I try for an Aqua Jet catch, I am unsuccessful, and my opponent is going to bring their Lunala into mine. They're down a ton of energy. Even though their Keldeo has a lot of energy stored, I have a Xerneas, so if I'm able to win switch advantage, I should be in a very, very comfortable spot. So I put up the shield, I'll immediately fire off the Shadow Ball knowing that I'm up energy, and now I can really make life uncomfortable for my opponent. Are they really willing to leave Keldeo without shields? No, they let it go, and they bring back in the Keldeo. Keldeo is going to have to go for the Aqua Jet here, because if they go for the Secret Sword, it's triple resistant. It's not going to KO. Oh no, traitor! They go for the Secret Sword. That is triple resisted. That's like throwing a Shadow Ball at Nobstagoon. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. And here is me claiming my 5-0 set to get up to 26-21 ELO. But yeah, when in doubt, you can safely assume that Lunala is basically never in Secret Sword range. We move to the next match, picking up a pretty scary lead, Groudon into Kyurem Black. This is the Shadow Claw Kyurem Black, and it's able to output these Freeze Shocks at alarming frequency. I have to respect the Freeze Shock. If I get a shield call wrong, I'm getting KO'd. But they do bait with the Fusion Bolt. I'm going to farm up, my opponent tries for a catch, and thankfully, for once, I do not let a move from Groudon get caught onto the Flying type switch-in. I had a Fire Punch caught, I had a Precipice Blades caught, but finally, 3rd time's the charm, we finally learned the virtue of patience. Do not let the catch happen, and by having just an entire Precipice Blades loaded on the Groudon and their Lugia already out of the way, I'm feeling pretty good about winning this game. Lugia goes for a second fly, Lunala gets a full farm down, exiting with so much energy. Back in comes the Kyurem, and Kyurem is going to go for the Charge Attack Priority Tie to deny my energy. Fusion Bolt takes the knockout, but I can bring back in the Groudon. I'm already up to 100 energy. This Mudshot pacing is beautiful. Precipice Blades lands in the back. Oh no, they have Reshiram, and this is just a Groudon show. Groudon firing off Precipice Blades after Precipice Blades. The first one landed, the second one is shielded by the Reshiram, but Groudon's getting to a 3rd, and that's going to be game over. We're already at the Precipice Blades. Unfortunately, this is so long. Good night to Reshiram. Reshiram gets KO'd. Kyurem survives on 1 HP because Mudshot does basically no damage now. They knocked me out with the Fusion Bolt, so I'm forced to reveal my 3rd, but 1 Geomancy from Xerneas will take the win. We get an amazing lead in the next match, Groudon into Zacian. Something you may have noticed is this, I believe, is the first Zacian that we've seen in this video. The fairy types we've been seeing are Xerneas, and I think that is the correct fairy type to run. I think Xerneas currently just outperforms Zacian. Zacian here takes huge damage, they save switch into a Zygarde, and they just end up top lefting. But I don't want to lose focus here on the Xerneas versus Zacian discussion as we move into the final match. I do think that Xerneas is a lot more convincing into the Dragon types that are being used. The Reshirams, the Zekroms, the Palkias of the world. Zacian isn't really good into any of those. So I think personally, you've noticed it in my teams where I'm running a lot more Xerneas than Zacian, and I think my opponents are making the correct meta call. After Fire Punch baiting on the first, I'm now going for the Precipice Blades. Precipice Blades is going to be shielded, and now up 2 shields to 0, in comes Lunala. You really do not want to see a Lunala switch in when you don't have any shields to work with. It makes life very uncomfortable. I don't want to risk the CMP time. My Lunala, I don't have Best Buddy done on it yet, so it would be a 50-50 coin flip as to who won Charge Attack Priority, so I'll just take the farm. They pivot into Reshiram. Reshiram's only at 11 Dragon Breaths. They're 1 away from the Fusion Flare, so I can fire off the back-to-back Shadow Balls, and just like that, in a split second, their Reshiram is gone. They got 0 value out of it this entire game. They can bring back in Lunala, but Lunala is just going to get farmed. They bring in their final Pokemon, which is Eternatus. I do think that Eternatus is at bare minimum decent in this current iteration of the Master League, because even though I do technically wall them, I'm double resistant to Dragon Tails. That Flamethrower did a ton of neutral damage. It looks like 2 Flamethrowers plus the Dragon Tails comes very close to 2-shotting. I'm able to land the Moonblast. They're going to be firing off another Flamethrower, and now I have the Moonblast. Regardless of where it lands, firing off this Moonblast should win me the game. So I fire off the Moonblast, they end up catching it onto Lunala, but that works for me. In comes Eternatus. Eternatus gets the Dragon Tail me down, but 2 Mud Shots from the Groudon farm them down and take the win. And now some final thoughts on Groudon and its meta viability post Mud Shot buff. First off, I do think that Mud Shot is going to be the preferred fast move for Groudon in the regular Master League. I think in the Mega Masters, there's still a pretty strong argument to be made for Dragon Tail, just because with Dragon Tail, as the Primal Groudon, you're still able to very convincingly beat Pokemon like Zacian because due to the added fire subtyping, they can't ever really land the Behemoth Blade, and you don't really care about having triple resistant fast moves because even a Fire Punch comes close to one-shotting a Zacian. But in the regular Master League, where the stat products are a lot more even, I think having Mud Shot hitting for super effective, even if it's not a particularly powerful move, is still very important for that Groudon-Zacian interaction. Having that fast move pressure ensures that over time, and especially as they potentially fire off close combats and get debuffed, that you can maybe farm it into Fire Punch range, whereas the Dragon Tail Groudon never could. And Dragon Tail Groudon outside of Mega Masters was never really particularly convincing into a lot of the dragons like Palkia, just because Palkia had a pretty severe pacing advantage. But I think that Mud Shot with this buff helps Groudon do what it does well, which is core breaking a lot of the Fairy plus Lesser Dragon teams. And I call them Lesser Dragons just because they aren't Dialga and Palkia, but I do think they're better than Dialga and Palkia right now, like the Reshiram, the Zekrams of the world. They offer insane neutral play, and they're part of the reason why Pokemon like Zacian are a lot less popular in higher ELO, just because with all the Zekrom and the Reshiram running around, Zacian kind of gets destroyed by both of those. But Groudon's niche in the meta to me is pretty clear. Groudon beats Xerneas, it beats Zacian, it beats those lesser dragons, so you can end up having quite a significant amount of neutral play into a lot of those teams. I think those are kind of the most neutral teams you can build right now, or building around, like, the core for my Kyogre video was Xerneas plus Reshiram. I think that's one of the most neutral cores that you can run right now, and Groudon has really neutral play into both. And I do think that both Reshiram and Xerneas have an ability to fight back there to a certain degree, but you'd have to be very mindful with your energy management and stuff like that. So I do think Groudon is definitely improved. Between the two, Groudon or Kyogre, which one do I think is better? I think that's a bit of a tough call to make. I think they are both pretty strong Pokemon that you can put on winning teams and have very nice results with. I think both have the ability to potentially carry games. If I absolutely had to pick, I think I would probably have a slight edge towards Groudon just purely off of playstyle preference. I really like Pokemon that charge very quickly, and Groudon does have slightly faster pacing than Kyogre. So both are definitely improved. I think both you can use and have very, very nice results with. And I'm really happy to see some former Master League Titans getting a little bit of love when it comes to move updates. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching today's video, please do leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And an extra special thank you, as always, to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is sincerely appreciated, so thank you guys so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.